Good afternoon, students. Today we are going to discuss we're going to revise the topic of PIL, public interest litigation, and its role in environmental protection. So when we talk about PIL or public interest litigation, we have seen that how public interest litigation, they differ from the traditional litigation ways, and they are not strictly adversarial, and are something where petitioner seeks to uphold the cause of uh, public benefit, and they work for the interest of the society. And in public interest litigation cases that we have dealt with judicial interpretations, we have seen that courts are asked to deal with public grievances and over the violation of human rights by the state, or to vindicate the public policies embodied in the statute or constitutional provisions. And we have seen that how judiciary plays a very proactive role when it comes to public interest litigation, and plays a very vital active role in organizing and shaping the litigations. So when it comes to the nature and scope of public interest litigation, you can easily understand it, as we have dealt with this case earlier also in our class, that in Public Union, People's Union for Democratic Rights versus Union of India case, where we have seen that the Supreme Court has made some interesting observations regarding the scope and nature and scope of public interest litigation when it comes to dealing with movement, bringing about changes, and working for the interest of the humanity. So we have seen that Supreme Court talking about, observe that the public interest litigation acts like a strategic arm of the legal aid movement, which intends to bring about justice within the reach of poor masses, and constitute the where we see that masses who do not even stay present in the vision of the humanity. And it's a totality, in totality it's a very different kind of litigation from the ordinary traditional litigation, because you seek to see changes where the people are seeking relief, not for the personal interest but for the larger interest. And how court has observed that public interest litigation is brought before the court not for the purpose of enforcing the rights of a single individual or an individual against another, as what happens in ordinary case of litigations, but the interest of the larger section of society, people who are poor, ignorant, socially economically disadvantaged, and their atrocity which goes unnoticed, unaddressed many a times. And this is how we see that how it acts like a arm of rule of law, who does not just provide protection for the one who are fortunate, but also people who do not have the equal protection. And the poor too get the benefit of the civil and political right and rule of law, which is made for them also. And how public interest litigation ensures that the rights and liberties do not exist on the paper, but they come also into reality for the people who are downtrodden. Next important thing that we will be revising is the when we talk about here Article 39A also plays a very important role when we talk about free legal aid, and how it was inserted in the constitution for Second Amendment Act 1976. And when we talk about the features, we have seen that how public interest litigation is a new kind of litigation, and its scope is not just limited to lawsuits that are related to specific breach of contract or other personal injuries or personal matters, but rather it is how it is well consciously shaped by the courts and the parties, like socially active, public spirited individuals who have given a broader scope to this whole concept. And the party structure is not just limited to individual adversaries, people who are direct victim or interested parties. How the scope is much more amplified now, and the inquiry is not just simple investigation of what has happened. Rather it is about the current problems which is being undertaken when it comes to legislative bodies. And here the relief is not limited to mere compensation. of for whatever has been done wrong in the past, but rather it focuses on the remedial measures, the perspectives, of having broad impact on the people's their life, not just the party to the dispute. So we are talking about how the decision going to impact the larger public interest, and the judgment does not end with the court's involvement. So if they have given the judgment, does not mean that the court's involvement will be there and then it will not end there, but it requires a continuous administrative judicial role. And here the judge is not, as we have already discussed, the adversarial inquisitorial system. The judges in PIL cases, they are no longer playing a passive role, but they are very much active. uh, um, they play a very active role in organizing and shaping the litigation itself. And the subject matter of the litigation, as we have discussed already, is not private in nature, rather has a nature of grievance is about the public policy, grievance is about the public interest. So the scope of public interest litigation when it comes to environmental protection and its role in environment is in environmental protection is way too much important, because it practically shapes the whole process. It practically provides protection, enlarges the protection, that is, and it works for the public interest. As Supreme Court has observed in Bandhwa Mukti Morcha versus Union of India case, that public interest litigation is not in the nature of adversary litigation, but it is a challenge. And it is also an opportunity for the government and its officers to make basic human rights meaningful to the deprived and vulnerable section of the community, something that our constitution has tried guaranteeing us. So when we talk about further, we'll look into the uh, collaborative and investigative components, how it involves PIL involves collaborative and investigative components. Because when we talk about collaborative litigation procedure, it presumes relationship between the parties, and the one relationship which is based on communication and cooperation rather than dispute. The combat is not there. They try to focus on the remedy. So here we know that there are two kinds of tools, with two kinds of litigation which undergoes collaborative and investigative litigations. So when we talk about the collaborative investigation, the public interest is a collaborative effort on the part of the claimant and the court and the government and public official to see that the basic human rights of the human beings are being respected, are being guaranteed, especially when we talk about larger masses. Large pool of masses, people who are downtrodden, backward, and the collaborative, it works on on undisputed facts, and once they are brought to light, they try to reach onto conclusion in order to take up actions which are required to bring about remedial measures. And in investigative litigation, we have seen that parties, they don't just collaborate, but the court steps out the passive role of typical of adversarial litigation to play an active role in investigating the facts. So you also see the change in the role of the court, also the judges also. And the primary criteria which is used by the court in investigative litigation is the appointment of special commissions. So you have seen how special commissions may lead to collaborative resolutions also. And when we talk about the rest of the features, we see that how it makes access to justice, you know, more, how it makes justice more accessible. So we have dealt with numerous case laws in our sessions. We have dealt with case laws. We have seen the observation of the court, how they have developed the whole purview and how the whole system of green, this whole concept of environmental protection, sustenance has or sustainable development has been molded by the courts literally. So when we talk about access to justice, the first in line is locus standi. So when we say that the traditional concept of locus standi was based on Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence, when made justice accessible only to the one person having the resources, or the one having the interest. And what happens when we talk about the public interest litigation is an exception to this whole concept. So here you're no longer required to be interested in the victim or the interested party of the dispute, but for the larger interest you can bring up the matters and try to seek the remedy. So here then we next thing that we have discussed was that representative standard and citizen standard. So when you talk about representative standard, so we know that in the judge's transfer case, SP Gupta versus Union of India 1981, we have seen that public interest was initiated by lawyers seeking the verdict of Supreme Court on issues relating to independence of judges, of judiciary, their transfer from one high court to another high court. And when we talk about the vital interest of independence of judiciary, we have seen that the whole traditional concept of standing has been modified by the Supreme Court by allowing any member of the public, any active member of the public, to seek judicial redress for the legal wrong that is being caused to a person or to a determinant class, or and the class is unable to represent themselves because they are poor, they are helpless, disabled, or in a socially or economical manner. Or so this whole modification into the concept of locus standi, it is termed as representative standing. So assuming that the petitioner is accorded standing as the representative of another person or another group, so through that person the petitioner gets the standing, is being represented. And the whole concept of representative standing, it refutes a traditional assumption that only a petitioner, who's having self-interest, will present a case. So public interest litigation is brought before the court not for the purpose of enforcing the right of individual against individual. Rather, it is intended to prosecute and vindicate rights of large number of people who are poor, ignorant, socially, economically, and their rights go or their problems go unnoticed. And because it will eventually lead to destruction of the very doctrine of rule of law. So similarly, citizen standing, when we talk about it is a citizen standing, and when we talk about the whole pro bono public, or for the interest in good faith and for the public benefit when you undertake an action. So public interest or community interest and are based upon their good conscience, which is the essential features of the public interest doctrine. And when we talk about a petitioner under a citizen standing, in contrast to representative standing, when a citizen standing sues not only a representative of other, but in his own right as a member of the citizen to whom public duty is owed. So in public interest litigation concerning the protection of environment, you see the petitioners enjoy citizen standing. The cases concerning protection of environment are not brought on behalf of a determinate group of persons who suffer from the poverty or social oppression. Rather, the claims of the petitioner are shared by the public generally. And the like if you talk about in Indian jurisprudence, it demonstrates that the distinction between representative and citizen standing has almost vanished. Neither the court nor the parties make the decision. Instead, the two originally separate rationales for expanding standing seem to have merged in a single doctrine of public interest standing. So anybody whosoever is public spirited enough to bring up cause, to bring about the issue which concerns the general public, can bring up the matter and seek the help and seek the remedy. And in a pro bono publico, again, we know that it is based upon how litigation initiated, any litigation which is initiated in good faith, having good conscience for the public interest, and not mere for the selfish interest, but rather for it has a character, like we have seen character of public interest, like we have seen in Bandhwa Mukti Morcha versus Union of India case, and Sachidanand Pandey versus State of West Bengal case. So in Bandhwa Mukti Morcha, we have seen that the Supreme Court insisted that the bona fides of the petitioner stated that the court would not, in exercise of its discretion, intervene at the instance of a middleman, as a busybody. But the court termed bona fides of the petitioner as the essential condition for initiating the public interest litigation. So when you talk about any litigation, which any litigation initiated for the protection of private interest, or as with the respondent, or having enmity with the respondent, loses its character of public interest litigation. So the element of private interest, the animosity, object, other interest, selfish objective should not be present. Otherwise, it will refute the whole purpose, objective, and the spirit of public interest. So the public interest, or the community interest, and good conscience are the two essential features of public interest doctrine. And when we look at the role of public interest, we see that how it further strengthens the whole concept of sustainable development. We have seen it with the help of case laws. We have seen it that how they play a very, very important role when it comes to public interest litigation. And next that we will be discussing is that a collaborative effort or procedures that presumes the relationship between the party and investigative litigation. So when you look at the collaborative efforts and the investigative litigation, you see that how it all of it, along with access to justice, allows the court to work for the benefit of people, allows the court to work for strengthening the concept of sustainable development, to further develop it. We have seen it with a lot of case laws that we have discussed it in our class, like MC Mehta versus Union of India, Sri Ram Gasly case of 1987. We have seen that how Supreme Court has evolved a doctrine of absolute liability when it comes to hazardous substances, and how they have modified the whole the purview of responsibility, and how the a precautionary principle, the polluter pays principle, and deep pocket theory was being applied. And when we talk about the observation of the Supreme Court in the said case, they said that the letters would ordinarily be addressed by poor and disadvantaged persons, or by social actions groups who may not know the proper form of address. So that is what they have observed about public interest litigation. They may know only a particular judge who comes from the state. They may therefore address the letter to him. And if the court were to insist that the letters must be addressed to the court or the Chief Justice and his companion judges, it will exclude the judicial ken a large number of letters, and the result deny justice to the deprived and vulnerable section of the community. And in this, Supreme Court has taken the view that even if a letter is addressed to an individual judge of the court, it should be entertained, provided that it is by or on behalf of a person in custody, or on behalf of a woman or child, or a class deprived of advantageous person. And if the court found no difficulty in entertaining letters addressed to the individual justice of the court, because the court has a public interest litigation cell to which all letters addressed to the court or the individual justice are forwarded, and the staff attached to the cell examines the letters and takes the further, scrutinizes it, and forwards it for the further procedures. So when we talk about how public interest litigation has further developed the concept of sustainable development, we have seen then how judiciary has played a very significant role in implementing, implementation of sustainable development, which essentially insist on balancing the synthesis of development and environment imperatives. And it does not just talk about the development for the present generation, but allowing the future generation to reap the benefit of natural resources. And how sustainable developments mean a development which has environmental consent. We have discussed many case laws here. Vellore Citizens Welfare Forum versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court held that the sustainable development acts as a balancing concept between ecology and development. And even it is accepted as a customary international law, Then Narmada Bachao Andolan versus Union of India, very important case when we have to talk about the role of Supreme Court in, or the role of judiciary in balancing out economic activities and the environmental requirement needs, or the ecological balance. So we have that we have seen that how court stated that the sustainable development mean what type or what extent of development can take place, which can be sustained by nature, or ecology with or without the mitigation. And the Supreme Court balanced the environmental and development imperatives by by focusing that both are required to be harmoniously balanced out. And then finally, when we look at the constitutional aspect, we see that in public interest litigation, Supreme Court has demonstrated, exceptionally, exemplary activism in treating rights to the right to environment as a part of fundamental right. So much so that it is enshrined in Article 21 of the Indian Constitution now. With this case of rural litigation and entitlement Kendra versus state of Uttar Pradesh, which was the first, public interest litigation of its kind in the country, which invoked the issue relating to environment and ecological balance. And the Supreme Court has delivered two very important orders, one in 1985 and another in 87. And when we talk about the Supreme Court, in this case, it was when Supreme Court has given effect to the social obligation to protect the environment, and also emphasized on the needs to remind every one of us, every Indian, of his fundamental duty to protect the environment, which is contained under Article 51 AG. So with so many other cases, we have discussed the importance of, the role of public interest litigation in further strengthening and dealing with the concept of environmental protection. So you can go through again, you can revise cases like your Indian Council for Environment Legal Action versus Union of India, MC Mehta versus Union of India. Now, Taj Trapezium case that we have been doing a number of times, we have discussed its revises also. And finally, when you talk about the role of public interest litigation and how well it acts when it comes to environmental jurisprudence in India, we have seen that the judiciary has in India has realized that the failure to give effect to the constitutional mandate of environmental protection would eventually result in breach of its constitutional duty. And we have seen how how enormously we have seen environmental jurisprudence in India has been enriched by the courts while hearing public interest litigation, and how Supreme Court has liberalize the whole concept of standing when it comes to public interest litigation. And court has laid down so many innovative principles of environmental jurisprudence, has given them new dimensions. And what is more important for us to see is that the Supreme Court has given not only innovative or new dimensions to this whole concept, but also has made all of us realize that it's not just the duty of the government to take care of the environment, but it's a combined duty of everybody whosoever is here in this territory, to ensure that actions are not having detrimental impact on the environment in a way that you're not able to ever reverse the impact on the environment itself. And with the help of public interest litigation, we have seen that the judiciary has, is been trying and has played a very crucial role in giving effect to the constitutional mandate, and in protecting and conserving and the interest of the people, and also balancing it out the economic activities along with the environmental protection.